He says this view is going to have serious problems staying afloat since we plausibly ask whether it's true, and of course we get into problems. But he says moral nihilism, or moral relativism, doesn't deny that there are absolute moral truths, which is kind of interesting, right? It doesn't say that all truths about morality are relative. Rather, moral nihilism denies that there are absolute moral standards, right? So that's a different kind of claim, right? It's not talking about a claim about truth. It's talking about a claim about standards. And so he says to say that all moral standards are relative to humans doesn't at all compromise itself. To say that all moral truths are relative does. And so he wants us to make this distinction between moral standards and moral truths. And yes, when we talk about truth and you suggest that it's limited, but you make a universal statement about it, then that's a problem. But he's saying if you're talking about moral standards, then he doesn't think that this is a self-referentially or an incoherent or a logically problematic type of statement. So he says most atheists probably don't resist moral nihilism because there's a lack of evidence for it, or because it's incoherent. So
weird.
Yeah, he says his guess is that the main reason for their resistance is that nihilism is just plain hard to stomach, right? They don't like it, right?
Utilitarian in their approach.
Yeah. He quotes James Rachel's here. Consider what it would be like for someone actually to believe that nothing is right or wrong, he says. Someone who said this would mean presumably that rape is neither right or wrong, torture is neither right or wrong, the murder is neither right or wrong, and so on for anything else that might be mentioned. If all of this were said seriously and not just as part of a philosophical discussion, and here's the point here, it would be alarming in the extreme, right? Not that it's logically wrong, but I don't like it because it's alarming, right? It's scary.
Yeah, Sam Harris has also said the same thing about whether or not we're free agents to make free choices. He says that if scientists actually followed through with what they understand and what they should be believing, that would cause this kind of moral, cultural panic.
Yeah.
Well, just do the same thing here, right?
So the difficulty with nihilism then isn't that it's hard to see or how it follows from naturalism. He thinks that's pretty straightforward, right? But the difficulty is that it's people get upset about it. It's disturbing, right? It's alarming, right? That's the problem with it, and so people don't like it. Not that it doesn't follow from naturalism, but that it doesn't. But that folks don't like it. He quotes Rosenberg again. Basically, it turns out that anyone can really find our answers that they like. Rosenberg says, real moral disputes can be ended in lots of ways: by voting, by decree, by fatigue of the disputants, by the force of example that changes social morals. But they can never really be resolved by finding the correct answers. There are none. Yeah. So here, Rosenberg is a nihilist.
Yeah, that's what I see a lot of people argue is, there are so many takes on it, therefore, morality is relative. Like, well, just because there are more numbers in the possible answers for 2 + 2 doesn't mean that there isn't an answer.
Right. Yeah. Just because people disagree, there's differences. Doesn't mean that there isn't a real answer. Right? Just because because of disagreement. Right. So he says, if naturalism is true, then nihilism is true. They lead. Naturalism leads to nihilism, and that's what the point he's trying to make here. And so he says, perhaps we should give up the belief that naturalism is true. So there's an option, right? We can avoid nihilism if we throw out naturalism, right? He says, if we can't block the inference from naturalism to nihilism, then this might give us enough reason to question whether science really shows that there is no God, right? So, he's suggesting that folks don't like that.
Right.
So we have an issue here, right? If if naturalism implies nihilism, then a consistent naturalist must either accept moral nihilism or give up naturalism. Right. So those are your choices here.
Yeah.
Right?
So you can either care or you don't care.
Yeah.